Welcome to Ride On, episode 15. I'm James Gross, so I'm joined by my co-host, Julia Fain. Julia, how you doing?
James, doing well today. I am house and pet sitting for a friend. So normally you would see kind of like a Bernedoodle pop up on the side here. He's out for a walk right now. Not alone. I'm a good pet sitter if anybody needs one. But yeah, that's how I'm doing. How about you?
Wait, so I just want to understand, you're pet sitting, but you're not actually walking the pet. So you've got a
pet
babysitter for the
a
pet?
dog walker. Okay, it's not.
Wow.
I did not pet sit and then like contract out a dog walker to walk the dog. No, this is like a normal thing. The dog walker comes on Thursday mornings. The dog is totally fine. Alex and Mona, if you're watching this, Moosh is good.
Musha. I feel like we're just like you and I are just far enough apart in age differences where I just don't understand a lot of things you talk about. Like, it just goes, like, this is how the world is now. Like, this is what millennials are doing.
Yeah,
that's
okay. That's what's happening.
I'm not going to judge. All right, well, let's get into this. So we've got a couple of exciting announcements. So we're going to continue for another week of the Prodigy giveaway. From last week, we had Kevin on from Ride1Up and their awesome vehicles. And we're going to keep the giveaway going for the Prodigy. So, if you haven't entered yet, feel free. You got a whole nother week. We'll announce the winner next week. As well, we have a Vvolt giveaway we're going to do. And we're going to have the founder, actually, of Vvolt and the CEO on the show later today, Kyle Ranson, to talk about some of their vehicles, including the one that we're going to give away. So we're going to give away a Sirius eBike, which is from their first lineup that they have. And then today, they're also going to talk about their utility series of vehicles that they're now launching, which are super, super cool. So excited to have two giveaways going at once. I know that's a lot going on, but you can go to ridereview.com to enter both of those giveaways. And of course, we appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel and leave comments about these vehicles as well. The final thing I'll say, Julia, I know we've been talking a lot about our upcoming show in Europe, and we aren't going to announce anything just quite yet, but I would definitely say if you're in Amsterdam, you're going to want to be a part of Micromobility Europe, the ride on Friday, June 9th, which will kick off. Well, in the afternoon, we'll allow for anyone to come in and do test rides if they get a ticket. But then at 4 p.m., we'll be leaving the Kromet Hall to actually go on a ride. And so if you're in Amsterdam or around Amsterdam and you're interested in riding with some other folks on different types of micromobility vehicles, definitely find your way to Micromobility Europe that afternoon, because it's going to be a bunch of fun. Anything on that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know. That was like a dramatic pause. I mean, I'm trying not to give away any secrets, James. I've been following the Slack channel, seeing how things are changing and evolving in a positive and maybe even bigger direction for that ride. So I'm just being a vault over here. I'm giving away no secrets. I'm giving away no hints. We already had 2 giveaways on the show, so it feels like we've done enough in terms of announcements. I think let's just leave it at that. Let's just leave it at a pause.
Okay, fair enough. Let's leave it at a pause. Cool. Well, let's get into the news, Julia. What do you got on your end?
James, big news this week out of New York City, and it's news of the best kind. So this year, New York City is celebrating 10 years of Citi Bike. And there's this really lovely article by a journalist called Alyssa Walker. And I don't know, James, if you read a lot of her stuff, but she is pretty prolific on transportation. She used to write a lot about LA, and maybe not in the positive about LA, just kind of how LA needed to get its act together in terms of bike lanes and bike share and everything else, transit, ridership for that matter. But she now writes for multiple publications, including about New York. And so in this article, which you should definitely give a read, she interviews founders, riders, and other folks, policymakers who are telling the story of how New York got Citi Bike and how this very globally influential bike share program came about and where it's headed next. And I think what's pretty cool about this, James, is it's a good reminder of how sometimes you have to step over the naysayers in order to do something that ultimately ends up being really successful. And I say that not that you should ignore everybody's opinions or don't listen to anybody or that we should have, bike share dictatorships. but more so in that whether it's Jeanette Sadi-Khan or some of the folks who actually put out the request for proposals on getting this bike share system to be, there were a lot of people, including media at the time, that were just covering every single bike incident or traffic collision that happened, and really taking policymakers to task in terms of bike lane provision and just this investment in bike share. So huge story in that we've got 10 years of Citi Bike, and not just 10 years of Citi Bike, but actually this past week, Citi Bike smashed its new ridership record. So had the most rides in 1 week of any time during those 10 years. And I think what this is showing is just that when you put together the right ingredients, when you have the density, when you have the bike share, when you have enough stations, when you have folks who are using the bikes for different reasons, you really get the keys to success for a bike share program. So James, what do you think? I mean, were you living in New York City when they had Citi Bike, when Citi Bike first came out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely a fun fact / humble brag here, Julia, is that my company Percolate was the first company to ever offer Citi. As far as I know, what I heard is that Percolate was the first company to ever offer Citi Bike to their employees, which is wild, because now that's like the biggest part of their business is sort of the employee incentive model, where of course big companies, the Amexes and JP Morgans and others in New York City offer this to their employees. Because as you mentioned, the awesome thing about Citi Bike is if you look at the growth, it's like stunning sort of annual growth, like where, in that chart that we share, like it starts off very small, and then of course every year, and there's some seasonality, but even in the winter, they still get a lot of rides, but there is some seasonality. And then you see these big jumps every single year. And again, it's one of those things I'm like really excited about, where I don't think it will ever end. I think like we're always going to have growth. Like there's so much potential growth ahead. It's great that they're setting records and, doing hundreds of thousands of trips a month, but I think it's going to be even bigger. So yeah, it's an awesome story. I'm super glad that I have this I think I have this fun fact around it that we were a part of. We were part of the beginning of it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
Drop in the comments if you think that your company was before Percolate in terms of offering Citi Bike.
Please. I would love that. Yeah, so it's a great story, and I love it. And go Citi Bike, keep it going, and go New York, because I think I was actually just there this weekend. It's a great way to get around. Much better than a cab, much better than a subway, much better than even walking, in my opinion, is fast.
Yeah, it's true.
And the new bikes are cool.
Oh, interesting. What are the new bikes? Are they e-bikes?
Yeah, they're e-bikes. We just had Carolyn Zambrano from Lyft on the podcast with Oliver Bruce, and she talked about those new vehicles. And they're cool. They look like I guess I'd call it futuristic, and they're quick, and I have a slight complaint about their cost. I just think it's a little bit too much. Oh gosh, it's so, like, for instance, back in the day, of course, if you bought the annual membership, which I think is like up to $200 now, I think I could be wrong on that, but it's also an additional cost on top of it on a per mile basis. I don't have an annual membership anymore because I don't live there. I'm not exactly sure what the cost was, to be honest. I took one actually this week, but it's pricey. It's still cheaper than, of course,
like an Uber or Lyft or taxi
or anything like that,
yeah,
or taxi,
yeah,
but more expensive than the subway, which again, that's okay, but it's just like one of those things where I would like to see that cost curve come down, and I think they of course will try to do that, but I think it could come down more for sure. It shouldn't be like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a luxury ride; it's a utility ride. So how can we get more people to do it and not feel like they're breaking the bank?
Definitely. Maybe increase some of those subsidies or whatever. Yeah, just to get that price down.
Let's talk about some launches, Julia. So we got a bunch of new vehicles coming out like normal. And then a couple of that are like kind of picking up momentum on some of the things that we talked about in previous weeks. So first wanted to give a shout out to not someone we usually talk about with micromobility, but that's good old fashioned GM, or General Motors, here in the US, who is putting out an electric pickup truck that basically is comparable to the Fiat 500 and like just qualifies, as far as I know. There's not a lot of information about the exact weight of it, but we believe it qualifies for basically the micromobility qualification of under 2,200 pounds or 1,000 kilograms. they're developing this specifically for the Chinese market, and they're doing it in partnership with Wuling, who we talked about Wuling last week with their inflatable mattress in the back, which Julia, I know you really enjoyed that one. And your
Couldn't figure that one out.
potential
Yeah.
PCH dreams on the this is basically a very similar type of vehicle with a very similar type of horsepower, but again, catering towards, as far as we've seen so far, the Chinese market, and they will not enter the U.S. or European markets with this vehicle anytime soon. So, yeah, what do you think, Julia? Should they be bringing that tiny electric truck to the U.S., or is it just going to get run over?
I mean, hell yes. Like, I think, I kind of wonder about this decision actually from GM. Like, I wonder if there's like a regulatory reason why they're not doing it. Like, I don't know, it's not street ready, or they don't think the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration or NHTSA would qualify it, compared to some of their much larger electric pickup trucks that they have on the road, or much larger pickup trucks generally that are on the road. But yeah, I mean, I feel like there's this like fantasy that Americans wouldn't accept a tiny electric pickup truck. And I just think that that's wrong. Like, it could be really cool. And this could be actually a gateway drug, or a way for, gateway drug is probably not the right thing to say. But anyways, it could be a way for people to just, try out something a little bit different at a lower price point. And they might also open up a different market than is otherwise available to them because of the price point, and because this is something that, parents might like their kids to use, or whatever else. So yeah, I do think it's disappointing that they're not bringing it to the US. I'd love to see how it does in China. And for that matter, it seems like China is also outpacing the US in terms of the diversity of vehicles, or, cars and trucks, and sizes of cars and trucks that are going to be on the road. Personally, I think that's a good thing. I think you kind of want to start moving away from bigger is better, and more towards let's right size the vehicle for the right trip. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool that they're doing a tiny electric pickup truck, and I would love to see them bring it to the US.
Yep, I agree. And we'll have to see. On to another Chinese American manufacturer, Segway and Ninebot, who will be at Micromobility Europe, of course, and they've updated their entire 2023 lineup, which again we'll see actually in Europe in a couple weeks here. And so, we all know Segway for just a full portfolio of micromobility vehicles, from scooters to one wheels to of course e-bikes, and even mopeds, and all the way up to almost neighborhood electric vehicles. Their new lineup, and I think what was great, Zag Daily had an article out about their focus on computer vision. So going all in on computer vision as it relates to, of course, safety for owned micromobility, and then compliance and safety for shared micromobility. Julia, I was just in New York at an AI, or artificial intelligence conference. I was really excited and blown away by what I saw at that event and what's coming down the pipe. And one thing I think we've got to talk more about, and I think even give ourselves a little bit of a hard time with our city stage and policy at our events, is the AI coming is wild. And I think for the first time, you can start to see how computer vision is really going to drive these vehicles in ways I think would be out of a sci-fi movie only a couple of years ago. And I think we talk a lot about, painting lanes green and safe infrastructure. And I know, as far as I know very few people in policy or in positions of power that understand what's coming from an artificial intelligence perspective and how that can be used. And of course, at the same time, we know we're losing 1.3 million people a year to traffic violence, almost all related to the car. So I know this is not an announcement necessarily, although it is an announcement what Segway is doing, and I compliment them for pushing the ball forward on this technology. But I also, just coming out of this event this week, I think it's really important we start talking about AI, and we start to understand who are our leaders that understand this technology, and how are they making sure it's being implemented, and of course, how are they incentivizing companies to make sure it's being pushed forward. We talk a lot about electrification, very little about the AI, and AI is, I think, coming a lot more fast. So yeah, what do you think?
So interesting. I mean, first of all, I feel like a little bit out of my depth, even in talking about AI and AI related to micromobility. So I think it's a great idea to have more folks who are in the AI space come to micromobility and also share with policymakers what they're doing and why it's important. I mean, just in general, I think when you talk about AI, where it seems to me like the real opportunities are you're able to get 95% of the benefits with 95% less infrastructure. So you're able to, incorporate some of these things into the vehicle itself, into the ways in which the vehicles are used, into, multiple types of vehicles. And so you don't necessarily have to do all like I was going to say brick and mortar, but, all of like the physical infrastructure stuff, because a lot of it is happening instead digitally. So yeah, totally +1 to the idea of having more conversations around how AI will be helpful for micromobility and for improving things like safety, or just, improving the ways in which the bikes themselves are protected, or people are protected for that matter. But I do agree that this is probably a space where policymakers at all levels and at all, in many different countries are behind. And so it would be a useful place for education and discussion.
Yep. So I think, shout out to anyone in AI and specifically in mobility that wants to come and talk and just be more of a part of our community and our industry. Because I think it's coming super quick, and I don't think we're ready for it. And I like what you said there, Julia. It's like, what gains can we make digitally that we're just, physically know would take way too long, or it's just, progress is way too slow. So yeah, it's an exciting time for us. Back to the vehicle. So I also wanted to call out Lemo, who has what they call an E+ bike. This is some really cool, what they call a sort of marvel of European engineering. And they have a patented dual mode hub motor that actually allows you to shift between riding an electric bike and a more acoustic vehicle. And they do it with this, kind of what's called this detachable smart pack that you slide onto the frame of the vehicle in this sort of very elegant way, so that you can balance between riding electric or riding acoustic. And, there's all sorts of feelings about that, but I like the look of it. I think it's a clever idea. It's better than some of the other acoustic to, e-bike vehicles that I've seen on the market. So yeah, I'm excited about what they have. And of course, I hope we'll see them at Europe, although I don't know if they'll be there. What's your thought there, Julia? Are you riding acoustic at all anymore now that you got your rad? Are you fully electric? Do you miss acoustic?
Yeah, I mean, great question. First of all, what comes to mind is what's the price point? Because I think what's pretty cool about this is when you're, talking about actually having an opportunity for folks to buy traditional bikes cheaper and then convert them into e-bikes really easily. I'm thinking of a lot of the, cargo bike and delivery riders. Like, this is absolutely a way to do that. And so if this is at a good price point, if it's a UL certified battery, like all of a sudden you have just something that could be widely available to not just, folks at a higher price point who want to be able to ride a traditional bike on the weekends when they're trying to get a workout, and then an e-bike during the week when they're commuting, but also for somebody who's actually using their bike as a way of making money. For me, I mean, I like this idea too. I definitely still like biking traditionally, acoustically. What, or is acoustically the right way to say this? I feel like that's not right. Yeah. It's like an acoustic versus an electric guitar. So you have an acoustic and an electric guitar in one. Yeah, I mean, I like that, of course, because I think there's such a joy of riding a traditional bicycle. Maybe it's because that's what I grew up on, that's what I know, but it's just it's such a joy to do that. And then an e-bike adds this utilitarian side to it. So yeah, I like this idea, and I hope it's at a price point that's available to enough people.
Okay. Yeah. And I think you brought up a really good point there that I want to just click on real quick, which is the UL certification. So being in New York this week, talking to a lot of companies, we've covered fires a lot, and there's still a lot of issues around fire safety. I sort of, one of the resolutions, like we heard from Tora at Juiced, was, hey, ultimately we're going to have to store the batteries in another place, either outside the building or in a safe lock box. This idea, like you mentioned, of UL certification, or just the idea of the user being used to sort of taking the battery off and maybe putting it somewhere else is something we might have to really look at. And so it's an interesting to think about this use case where people are very used to, of course, taking the battery off and on in this perspective. So yeah, that's something to watch. I just wanted to quickly, I'm not going to talk about any of the vehicles. We had Honda coming out with a new moped. Finland-based Verge Motorcycles came out with a super high-end motorcycle that they're doing in collaboration with the F1 racer Mika Häkkinen. It's like an $80,000 motorcycle. It's wild looking, so that's super cool.
Bring it to Europe. Bring it to Amsterdam.
I know, seriously, I'd love to see it. Decathlon had some new electric mountain bikes that they've released. We'll see Decathlon at Micromobility Europe, and then finally Canyon as well. Who, if you remember, Julia, last week, Kevin saying if I could get a vehicle that wasn't my Ride1Up, I'd get a Canyon. So Canyon's also got some new vehicles as they continue to electrify their offerings. And the Strive On, is out now. Super high-end Bosch performance motor and everything. So wanted to call them out as well. But yeah, Julia, I'll send that back to you.
Yeah, and that's a question. Kyle. Yeah. I was going to say that's a question that I might ask Kyle too. Is just like what is your bike of choice that's not your own? I think that's an interesting question to ask all these founders because, of course, they have a choice. They definitely have a choice. They're not going to say their own.
That's a tough one, Julia. That's like
it is. It's like a moment of truth.
Like, if you ask that,
editor, please edit that out.
You can ask that one. I try not to ask that question.
I am 1,000% going to ask that question.
Fair enough.
No, it's so good. And then we should create a ride review article that is just everybody's. Like here's the founder's other choice.
I mean,
it's
more
going to be good. It's going to be good.
That. The founders are that's the
all
hill you want to be on.
That's cool. No, I'm getting myself in trouble. Okay, well, let me get myself in trouble even further because we've got a bit of a scoop, James, that, it's not our scoop. It's somebody else's scoop, but it's still a scoop. So the first part of the scoop is that Estonia-based Bolt is gearing up for its first profitable year. And they are thinking about IPOing in 2025. On what market? I'm not really sure, but IPOing in 2025. Do you want to guess at their valuation? What do you think they're valued at?
I mean, companies have had a hard time lately. $2 billion.
Okay, well, you were really wrong. It's $8 billion. Not even close. I mean, you were sort of close if we're just talking about billions. Yeah, you're in the billions. Yeah. But if you all remember what Bolt does, they're a super app. They offer a range of services. They do ride hailing. They do food delivery. They do e-scooter rentals. And Bolt is not only thinking about going public, but also thinking about expanding outside of Europe in the very near future. So Bolt founder Markus, if you want to come on the show, we'd be happy to scoop that story too. But James, the plot thickens because not only is all this good stuff happening for Bolt, but Sifted has learned that Bolt is in late-stage acquisition talks with the German micromobility startup Tier. Are you shocked?
I think it's a big deal. I think that the entire shared marketplace was really excited about Tier. And, Tier has raised over $700 million. They were the one I think that people really thought might win and sort of come out as the prestigious brand in the European market. And so I don't know about shocked because we've seen so much happen in the shared marketplace. But this could be, I think a seminal moment for the first generation shared micromobility companies in Europe if this goes down. And I think ultimately what would be very interesting is what is the valuation and, how does that either reset a lot of other companies or how does that help a lot of other companies understand where they might be valued at?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting for a few reasons. You talk about Tier as being a European company, which it is, but it also acquired Spin. And actually, when we were at Micromobility Europe last year, I interviewed Lawrence, the CEO of Tier, and talked a little bit about that acquisition and how that represented them getting into the U.S. market. And it wasn't that long before Micromobility Europe, actually, when that acquisition was announced. I'm going to get my months wrong, but I want to say it was that previous year or something. And then Tier made a series of acquisitions. Phantasmo was one of them. There were a few others that made it seem like, they were really going to start to grow and really had this kind of vertically integrated way of doing business. So I do think it's a bit of a seismic change that they might be acquired by Bolt. I think it's, just showing what's going to be happening in terms of consolidation of the shared micromobility sector in particular, and just investors saying kind of put up or show up. Wait, is that the way you say it? No, show up or put up? What's the phrase? Um,
Show up or shut up, or
sure, let's do a show up or shut up. But basically, like all these companies that, got a bunch of money, $700 million, more than that, are really going to need to start showing that they've done something with that money. And so let's see what happens with Bolt. But if that happens with Bolt, Bolt is going to be going head to head with folks like Lime. I don't even know if I put Lyft in the same category anymore, but certainly Lime. And having to show some of how it's going to be thinking of itself as more than just a shared micromobility, or for that matter, shared passenger micromobility, like for commutes, shared bike share type of business.
Yeah, I think it's, well, and I would just, like you said, open call to Bolt or to Tier to make this announcement on stage at Micromobility Europe, where you'll have the largest group of people that might be interested in this announcement, I believe. And have Lawrence.
That was quite a caveat. The largest group of people who might be interested in this.
I mean, this is, you're going to have everyone who's anyone that, knows Tier at this event. So and
fair enough.
Great, Julia, for you to interview Lawrence and.
Oh, I'd love that.
Markus,
I'd love that. Markus and Lawrence. Let's have a conversation.
All right. Well, speaking of that, and speaking of talking to a founder, let's invite up Kyle Ranson from Vvolt on stage to discuss their vehicles that they have that we're all super excited about. So Kyle Ranson, the co-founder and CEO of, well, this is my first question for you, Kyle, actually.
So go ahead.
I see how we spell Vvolt, or how do we say it? So VVOLT. Vvolt.
Yeah,
okay.
Vvolt.
So I'm saying,
yeah.
Great. And where did you come up with that name? Why Vvolt? Just curious there.
It was a combination of using voltage and velocity and valo, and just trying to really capture the essence of using the voltage to move you forward was really where it came from. And then, not to be crass, the domain was available on a global basis, which made it that much easier to choose it.
Well, as a company who's had some domain issues, we're all for that. We definitely understand the pain and the plight of selecting domains and not getting into legal fights over them.
well, the funny thing is it was actually quite flattering. Volvo came after us because somehow Vvolt sounds like Volvo. And we had to have a settlement with them where we agreed not to do, 4-wheel vehicles going after, on the freeway.
Unbelievable.
Quite flattering.
Unbelievable. Yes, right. Yeah. Thanks. Shout out to Volvo there. Way to get the guys trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Kyle, you have a kind of a really interesting history in terms of being a founder, multi-time entrepreneur. You started Shower Pass out of Portland, Oregon, I believe. Tell us a little bit about Shower Pass, because I think it's a very interesting company, of course, the space.
Yeah. So if I kind of take the clock back a little bit, I spent most of my career in the high-tech sector, and I was I was fortunate or unfortunate enough to be a public company CEO, which was totally soul-destroying. And after, surviving the obligatory 3 years, which is apparently how long an average public company CEO lasts, I found myself kind of really soul searching what I want to do. And I'd always had a passion for cycling. And I actually stumbled across, through a mutual contact, a tiny little business that had already been founded by a guy called Dave Morrow, called Showers Pass, that was really in a position ready to be taken into grow up into hopefully a real business. So acquired that business, and the idea was just a completely lifestyle change, following my passion versus the high tech that I'd always been in, and seeing if we could, build it into a nice little brand. And it's been a really fun journey. It is as you appreciate, doing bad weather gear for cyclists is kind of the definition of a niche in a niche. So it's been a fun business, and we're very proud. And if you live in the Pacific Northwest, it's kind of like a badge of honor to be wearing a Showers Pass. You're not a hardcore commuter unless you're wearing Showers Pass. It's kind of we've got almost a cult like following, which is kind of fun.
I love it. And so then with Showers Pass, when did you really start to dream about building an electric vehicle company? Which again, I say electric vehicle because in understanding some of your interviews, I think you have dreams even beyond the current,
Yes.
model that I see behind you. So
Except
when
no
did that-
four-wheelers, and definitely not
No,
anyone that are called
Yeah.
Vvolt.
no
Vvolt
four-wheel
to
trucks on the
Volvo.
freeways, thank you, Volvo. They can always come and acquire us, and there will be
I know. Then
There you
it's
go.
all fair. Yeah.
solve all the problems. So no, it was obviously a passion for cycling, and if I'm honest, I was one of those hardcore cyclists that was like a complete naysayer. I'm like, oh, this is cheating. I was one of those guys, and it was kind of my eyes open when I saw kind of friends and family jumping on, and I was just like, hold on a second, this is an amazing enabler. I've my whole life I've enjoyed the outdoors, mountain biking, and everything else, and I've relied on, luckily, a natural fitness to enjoy it. But that's kind of an elitist version of, but you've got to earn it to enjoy it. And I was like, hold on a second, with these new technologies, it's an amazing enabler. And then I started thinking, hold on, not just an enabler for the outdoors. This is an opportunity to totally transform how we think about urban and rural transportation. And that's when I started getting excited. I'm like, whoa, these new technologies, if the rate of evolution happens at the same rate that the PC industry did and the electric car industry is doing, this could solve all sorts of problems. And so I got excited about it, but then I was kind of observing it and started getting really frustrated because I got a high-tech background and I was watching what was going on. And first off, people were just thinking about it as bikes. That was the first thing I observed. I'm like, no. People should be thinking about this as modes of transportation and how to solve transportation problems and bringing these technologies together. And then I kind of saw the industry in the early days, and you had basically cheap and cheerful at one end, which is fine because it's actually an enabler. It makes people realize that, you don't have to mortgage your house to get one of these things. And then the existing industry, the big brands, they were still thinking of this as just a sport product with a motor on it. And they weren't really thinking any differently. And so I really found myself in meetings like bitching about it and complaining about what the industry was doing. I was like, well, Kyle, do something about it. You've got the supply chain high-tech background. You know the industry pretty well. Solve the damn problem. So that's when I started thinking. It was probably about 4 years ago. And then I was like, you know what? Stop talking about it and do something about it. And that's what pushed me into actually launching Vvolt.
Okay, well, good for you. And then I'll go one more question, and I'll also send it over to Julie after this. So, if I look at your first series, which is the Stellar series, which kind of sounds planetary, I guess, in the universe, and then which is very cool, and want to learn more about that. But then you also now have the Utility series, which you've announced, and of course, we'll show some of the videos around. That looks like a wild departure from the Stellar series in a way, and just like very, very interesting and different. And I think this is something Julie and I kind of obsess on, and talking to founders like yourself. And it's just like that starting to look less like a e-bike and something more just, almost other planetary in a way. So I'm curious, where did the vision for the Utility series come from? Where are you at with it? Who do you want to buy them? The 3 different models you have today. Yeah, I'd love that whole story.
So our original vision from day one was, could we solve the kind of transportation challenge for folks? I grew up in Europe, and the bike is seen in Europe more often than not as just a utility. It's not your hobby. It's a mode of transport. It's a form of transportation. And the reality here in the US, still for the most part, people think about bikes as it's kind of a hobby, and people that are really keen on the hobby go the whole hog and commute to work on their hobby. But you've started to see over the last decade, people through other reasons, whether it be affordability reasons, whether it be environmentally conscious reasons, are starting to embrace this notion of using a bicycle or an e-bike as a transportation. So we kind of set off to say, okay, how can we do that? And we're a self-funded business. I will put a plug. We're a self-funded business that's looking for financing. I should add that in West. We are self-funded, and the goal was, we kind of looked at our resources and said, look, we got this vision. that vision is it's gonna require resources, it's gonna require cash flow and everything to deliver on that vision. What can we do that we can be proud of and get to market quickly to start bringing some income in so we can deliver on our vision? And that's really where the Stellar Series comes from. One of the first things I did was building the team. Hired a young designer, very talented young designer. And I spent a lot of time in it. I did not want anybody out the cycling industry on the design team because I didn't want them to be stuck in the paradigms of what a bike is. And then I kind of left a fairly open boundary box, but I said, from day one, there will be no chains on any of our bikes. There will be no derailleurs on any of our bikes. I even said to our young designer, I said, for your final year engineering design project, if you were asked to design a gear change mechanism for an electric bicycle and you presented the derailleur as the solution, you'd fail your final year exam. Yet here's the whole industry still using derailleurs on e-bikes. It's complete nonsense. So I said, okay, we can get to market fairly quickly with something with, belt-driven, without a derailleur, that's maintenance-free at a fair price. And that was the whole vision around the Stellar Series. And we're pretty proud of that bike. But as you said, it's very recognizable as a traditional bicycle. We try to give it some nice design lines and everything else, but it is what it is. But in the background, once we got that out to market, last year was our full first year of revenue. And as we got that out to the market, we've really been focusing on now, what is the essence of what Vvolt is all about, and what can we do to kind of change some of the paradigms and the market stereotypes. The other thing that we wanted to do, and I'll draw a comparison to the car industry. When you think about the cycling, if you're buying a Toyota or a BMW, you don't care whose brakes are on it, whose shock absorbers are on it, you're buying a Toyota. Or you're buying a BMW. And the cycling has got itself wrapped around the axle on all the subcomponent branding for the consumer, which for most consumers is horribly confusing anyway. And so, that was the other thing we said. There's no branded products on our bikes where we have, because we want the consumer to trust us. We don't want the consumer to worry about, have they got decent brakes? Have they got whose brands of shock absorbers, whose brand of motors? So we went actually out of our way to find component suppliers that we were comfortable with, that were comfortable not having their brand on our bike, because it's about our brand. Trust us, not the subcomponents. And that's how we got started with the Stellar Series.
Yeah,
Great.
no, that's a fantastic story. And Kyle, maybe I have one or two quick questions for you. So one is, you mentioned that your background's in high tech, and then when you were starting Vvolt, you had wanted to really think about how do you incorporate high tech into the bike itself. And James and I, reported on this episode how Segway 9bot released its updated vehicle lineup. They have all these next gen features. Segway is going all in on computer vision. Question is, what high tech do you think is still missing from bikes today?
I kind of think about this a lot, and I try and fast forward 10 years from now, and what's it going to look like? Whether it's scooters, bikes, utility vehicles. I genuinely believe 10 years from now we're going to be in a position where every vehicle, whatever it is, will know where every other vehicle is on the road. These things are going to be aware of each other, which is going to cut, if you do any surveys today, one of the biggest barriers to utilizing something other than a traditional car is fear of safety. I'm not going to be safe. And the infrastructure and safety, two of the biggest factors. So I believe technology can go a long way to eliminating the fears of the safety. You're not going to avoid accidents altogether, because at the end of the day, we've still got humans that are on the damn things where they're usually the cause of the accidents. But where technology can be utilized to deliver that awareness of what's around you and who's around you and everything else. So I think you're starting to see that just emerge. And that's what I'm most excited about is that intercommunication between vehicles from a safety standpoint. things like where is my bike, how much battery, those are all givens.
No, I totally agree with you. And Kyle, it's almost like you were listening in on our earlier conversation, because I made a similar comment around just the ability of vehicles to sense each other and how that increases both actual safety and then perception of safety. So Kyle, final question on my end, and then I think we got to wrap up the episode here, but if you weren't going to ride your bike, like your Vvolt, what other bikes, e-bike out there on the market do you think is the best?
Oh, wow.
This gets everybody. James didn't want me to ask this question.
That's a really long question. I do love the design approach of VanMoof.
Oh, okay, nice.
I do think it's an attractive product. I do challenge their whole thinking with regards to design, in that they're literally reinventing the wheel, which makes the product exceedingly expensive and a challenge from a supply chain standpoint and everything else. But from a pure design exercise, I think they've done a really nice job.
Amazing. Great answer. All right, James, bring us home.
Well, shout out to the Carlier brothers on that, who we'll see in a couple weeks here in Europe. I guess my final question, Kyle, again, I can't speak enough for the utility series, and just like I really want to compliment you on the way you've got about it, of course, the aesthetic of it. On the cargo bike, which I guess you call the Pi, one thing I talked to Tora Harris from Juice Bikes a couple weeks ago, and he said, one of the things I'm always interested in is like, where do we put the battery in, and why do we always want to hide the battery? On the Pi, from what I can tell, is that the battery that I'm seeing that's actually behind the stem, or what's going on there? And
it's a
why is it like that?
It's a combination. We're going to have a battery in the down tube and then a secondary battery in that. So that is both a storage unit and secondary battery unit. So the idea is that you've got a very configurable product based on your needs. Are you doing a 5 mile commute, or are you doing a 20 mile? And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is make sure our products are very configurable and to enhance whatever it is the customer's looking for.
I got you. And so if I'm just a customer and watching this, when can I actually when can I buy one of these vehicles, and when will it actually arrive at my door?
First delivery of Slice, and hopefully you're starting to pick up on the pizza theme.
I am. Yeah, for sure.
First delivery of Slice will be in July. First products coming. We're anticipating that, so we're taking early orders for those now. Pi is still in the development stage, and we're still we're following. We're taking the Slice Lite. We're beating the hell out of that from a testing standpoint, and then extending that out to Pi. So Pi is probably about another 6 months out.
Great. Well, Kyle, congrats on your success to date and everything that you're building. And we're looking forward to riding some of these vehicles in the future. And thanks again for coming on.
Well, we appreciate what you guys are doing as well. It's just helping getting the word out on what we're all going to experience. It's going to be a hell of a journey over the next few years, so it should be fun.
Absolutely. Very
all right,
cool.
Sure
take care.
Thank you, Kyle.
Great to see you, Kyle.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know how to.
How do we end these things?
I'm like new. I gotta like wrap up.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go. That's like so weird. I couldn't remove them from what I could tell. All right, Julia. We are out of time. Shout out to Vvolt and to Kyle. I mean, again, another amazing story coming from other areas. Loved his answers as it relates to technology, and clearly his experience in technology. We're speaking, some people speak about it as it's so inevitable, which I agree with. At the same time, there's other people that don't even, haven't even been able to see and expose themselves to some of the amazing technology coming down the road. I think there's a nice optimistic way to end. And to Kyle and his team, again, congrats on building some beautiful looking vehicles, and really excited to ride them.
Absolutely. And James, I'm going to keep asking that question. It's going to become a perennial question on here.
I've got no control over folks.
So. It's intriguing. It's intriguing. I mean, that was a spicy answer. Yeah.
Everybody's got to. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exciting for Venmo.
Anyways.
Well,
Cool.
Julia, ride on. And I'll see you soon.
Right on. All right. Bye, James.